Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of United Talks podcast. This is another deep dive that I am super excited about. I'm excited about this one because, bro, I'm about to kind of, break down a whole lot of things. And I got excited about this. I watched this episode of Diary of a CEO between Steven Bartlett interviewing Bruno Fernandes. Mind you, Steven Bartlett is a Man United fan, and he interviewed Bruno Fernandes. And I've watched his shows on TikTok and on other social media platforms. And I went and watched this an hour and a half, over an hour and a half worth of content, like deep analysis, basically, and deep interview. But it boils down to question, like, how much is a man's loyalty worth in the modern game, basically? I mean, in an era dominated by hyperinflated salaries, we're talking about geopolitical sports washing and player agencies orchestrating transfers at the first sign of trouble, and we have grown so accustomed to the idea that every footballer has a price. Now, the truth is, I'm excited about this, and I am annoyed about what is actually going on in the social space about a player like this, Bruno Fernandes. You could tag him as the most hated player and all of that and everything in between, but I am so annoyed about this that I feel like we need to talk about it. So maybe 20 minutes is not enough to talk, but just lend me 20 minutes of your time. And if you're just joining us in this community for the first time, please do like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't have to miss anything as relates to all things Manchester United. And this is about our captain, Bruno Fernandes. The season is done. Season is over. What we're going to be getting in the summer is a whole lot of transfer news, deep dives and stuff, but we're going to be talking about stuff like this. Truth is, we expect, obviously, players like Bruno Fernandes, who are at the peak of their powers, to follow the money and ride off into the sunset when a generational life-altering contract is placed on their table. But what happens when the captain of the biggest and most heavily criticized club in the world is offered a staggering 100 million euros to walk away, basically, and he says no? What happens when the same player, standing at the absolute peak of his powers, chooses the cold, hard, chaotic reality of a massive rebuilding project over guaranteed wealth and instant silverware? That is the story of Bruno Fernandes, right? This is an untold, raw, and deeply human story. I was brought to tears when I just watched that video. I'm not saying Bruno's trying to appeal to my emotion. I'm only saying that he's spitting the facts that most Man United fans want to hear that is actually going on in the club. When a player is speaking like this, you want to get a sense of an idea what is going on at the club. This interview was done when he had his 20th assist. Manchester United captain sat down with Steven Bartlett on the Diary of a CEO for an explosive, unguarded 94-minute interview at Carrington. And it was a conversation that went from beyond the standard media trained sound bites we have come to expect from the modern athletes, to basic low-level standard questions from people like Gary Neville, who doesn't even do deep research before interviewing players. For example, Gary Neville interviewed Nemanja Vidic, but never knew that Nemanja Vidic won a lot of Man of the Match awards, and he won 3 Man of the Match awards or 4 Man of the Match awards in a season. But it is what it is. He didn't know, and he was shocked that Vidic was saying that. Surprisingly, Vidic has won 2 Premier League Player of the Seasons, but this guy didn't know. It is what it is. So it was a masterclass in psychology, tactical evolution, and cultural leadership. And we're breaking down every single layer of the extraordinary interview. I mean, we're now looking at the brutal childhood environment that forged how his elite mentality, the statistical breakdown of his record-breaking season, the tactical details of how he has thrived under 3 completely different managers, and the truth behind the Roy Keane controversy, which we'll talk about because it's really, really interesting. And I also have Roy Keane has responded basically with Instagram post, which we'll talk about as well. And I'll just kind of explain to you. I might not show you, but I'll kind of explain to you. Maybe if I get the chance to, I will. And we're going to get into the deeper personal reason why why Bruno turned down the biggest contract in football history to stay at Old Trafford. Now, to understand why Bruno Fernandes is the way he is on the football pitch, you have to understand why, where he came from. To understand why he is the way he is and why he is so relentless, so vocal, so seemingly immune to the crushing pressure of Manchester United captaincy, you have to also travel back to his childhood in Porto. I mean, in the modern game, we see players who are heavily protected, insulated from criticism by massive entourages and PR teams, but Bruno Fernandes is the exact opposite. He is a psychological anomaly that is entirely due to his father, and he talked about it that his father helped him build a huge level of strength and resilience in dealing with certain things like criticisms and stuff, and demanding, the absolute best. Growing up, Bruno's household was run on strict, demanding paternal blueprint. I mean, his father was not a man of outward warmth, according to what Bruno said. His father wasn't not the kind of guy that's huggy, but that just recently that he started being huggy and all that. But basically, his father was not the guy who had physical affection, but there were no hugs, no kisses. Like I said, no vocal praise during his childhood. Those emotional needs were met by his mother. Instead, his father, molded value through action, sacrifice, and uncompromising standard of excellence. He even said that his father didn't even want him to play football. In Portugal, academic tests are graded on a scale from 0 to 100%, typical, even if you go back to Nigeria and other places. Bruno recalls moments from his childhood when he scored an incredible 98% on a school exam. And that was as an example that he gave, basically. And for almost any other parent, according to Bruno's example, that is the moment of pure celebration. But when Bruno showed the paper to his father, his dad looked at him and asked him what happened to the missing 2%. That was like, showing him by example, like, okay, how do we achieve great things at the absolute 100%, that extra 1 or 2%, right? Now, this was not the cruel gesture. It was like a deliberate cognitive framing by his father. His father was actually teaching him how to focus entirely on the margin for improvement. The same philosophy was ruthlessly applied, to Bruno's football. I mean, he would come home from youth matches, having scored a hat-trick, expecting a word of praise or a word of praise from his dad. Instead, his dad would sit him down and systemically dissect the misplaced passes, the defensive lapses, the tactical errors. I mean, his father's feedback was always clear, right? That was good, but it was not great. That is what Bruno said. He said, my dad would say, it was good, but it was not great. Just dissecting. Okay, he said, I could come from a game, and then my dad would just basically dissect every misplaced pass and every mistake I had made. And he would say, that was good, but that was not great, which would mean that he wanted basically Bruno to have those, always have a margin for improvement, right? So, yeah. From a remarkably young age, Bruno was conditioned to process criticism as functional, objective, data-driven, and data designed to drive marginal gains rather than as a threat to his self-esteem. When he steps onto the pitch at Old Trafford in front of 75,000 screaming fans, or when he's slaughtered by pundits on national television, it does not actually dent his confidence. He says it even fuels him for success. It does not change how he behaves or how he wants to play. He has even been answering to a far more demanding critic in his entire life. It is this upbringing that has created this non-negotiable standard of commitment. Bruno Fernandes famously stated in the interview that he simply cannot do anything at 50, 60, 70, or even 80% capacity. If he's involved in something, he goes full. But his father was not the only person who basically left a permanent mark on his character. Bruno's mother worked cleaning houses, as Bruno stated, to support the family. This modest working class background instilled him with a deep, egalitarian respect for organizational structure and the human beings within them, right? Bruno, how hard his mother worked, basically. Bruno watched how hard his mother worked and promised himself that he would never allow anyone look down on her profession as a cleaning lady, as a person who goes and cleans houses. That is what Bruno said, right? Now, so many things he said. Today, the values those values and the value system is actively enforced in his own home with his children as well. He even gave an example. He said that he has a strict non-negotiable rule for his children regarding basically domestic staff who work in their house. His kids are absolutely forbidden from speaking condescendingly or even demanding things from the housekeeper. Now, if they want something, they must ask with utmost respect. If they are capable of doing it themselves, Bruno forces them to do it. Kind of says, this is how he described it basically. He said that instead of he told the domestic staff that instead of them to tell their children, go and get this yourself if the child needs it, because he's told the children not to ask anything of those domestic staff. Instead of them to say, go and get it yourself, he says, teach them how to get it. Bro, that's like values, instilling values. And the exact same egalitarian leadership style is what defines his captaincy at Carrington. Bruno treats the domestic cleaners in the club, the stewards, the physios, and the chefs with the exact same warmth, respect, and dignity that he offers to the club's CEO or his multi-million-dollar teammates. He understands that the club's culture is not built from the top down, but it is built from the bottom up. And if the foundation is built on mutual respect and care, the entire environment becomes positive, and you cannot have a successful organization if there's trash in the corridors and you cannot respect that person who cleans those corridors if you do not view them as an equal. He talked about it from perspective of the fact that, you can't come into a place that is not clean. So you have to also respect the person that is cleaning it, right? So it starts from bottom up. Now, the mental resilience and the humility were tested to the absolute limits during his early professional transitions. At just 17 years of age, Bruno left the comfort of Portugal to sign for Novara in the Serie B. They talked about other clubs he signed for when he was even like at 5 to 7. Now, signing for Novara at Serie B earned him a modest salary of just around 1,500. 1,500. That's 1,500 to 1,700 euros a month, and he was completely alone, basically, with his girlfriend then, and struggling with a new language, new culture, and the brutal tactical demands of Italian football. But he survived, earning a move to Udinese Calcio in Serie A. Now, the truth is, he talked about a manager that really helped mold him and all of that. It was at that Udinese that he met that manager who would help shape his tactical understanding of the game. The name is Francesco Guidolin. Basically, Guidolin gave the young Portuguese midfielder the foundation to be a fearless and expressive person, to be able to be fearless and express himself as well. But during that early days at the club, Bruno faced a massive professional crisis. The Pazzo family, who owned Udinese, also owned Watford in England. Now, because Udinese had an incredibly bloated squad, the directors decided to send Bruno to Watford on loan in the final days of the transfer window. Like, hearing that from him is like, bro, you nearly went to Watford? Bruno was devastated. He already packed his bags, questioning his own ability, even spoke to his then girlfriend at the time and wondering what he would have done wrong. His wife, who was his girlfriend at the time, stood by him, right? Telling him that they would succeed whichever place they go, wherever they went. But just as he was about to leave, the sporting director called him back into his office. Francesco Guidolin had intervened, and the manager had gone to the board and demanded that they keep Bruno, that Bruno must stay. Stating that he loved the teenager's work ethic, his attitude, and his desire to learn. Guidolin also told him that while he might not play every week, he was guaranteed to succeed if he stayed and learned the system. Now, the fatherly mentorship from Guidolin taught Bruno how to navigate the complex emotional relationships between players and manager as a lesson he carries with him as captain today. Now, as his Italian journey continued, Bruno basically returned to Portugal with Sporting CP as Sporting signed him for an 8.5 million euros fee. What followed was a period of absolute unmatched creative dominance, because that was where he started to pick up his powers. In the first full season, he registered an astronomical 20 goals and 15 assists from midfield, numbers that were completely unheard of in European football. Naturally, the Premier League came calling, and Tottenham Hotspur was the first that made the massive push to sign him. And Bruno, desperate for that move, he wanted to test himself in the best league, most competitive league in the world. Now, he spoke to the Tottenham hierarchy, agreed personal terms, and then the deal was virtually done. But in the final 48 hours of the window, Sporting CP pulled the plug, refusing to sell their star man. But Bruno was crushed. Right, he has tasted his dream only for it to be snatched away at the 11th hour. But rather than throwing the tantrum and letting his form drop, Bruno used his father's mental conditioning to build strict cognitive wall, and he instructed his agent, Miguel, to never speak to him about transfer speculations again unless the deal was 95% complete. He refused to let the things that he could not control to affect his performance on the pitch. And it was absolutely interesting and integral as to how Bruno Fernandes, dealt with that and navigated through the tough times in football. And in truth, he also said that he didn't even want to watch the news or see what was happening in the media to be able to react or respond to certain things like that. The discipline was met with a reward in January of 2020. Bruno was in his wardrobe getting ready for bed while his wife was putting the young daughter to sleep. Suddenly, his phone rang, and it was his agent, Miguel, bypassed Bruno's strict rule with a simple, life-changing sentence. Manchester United have met the terms, and we have an agreement, and the decision is now entirely down to you. Now, he said that for 10 to 20 seconds, he could not speak, and his voice the voice that carried him through that Porto, Novara, Udinese, Lisbon, completely choked up. He began to weep silently in his wardrobe, and his wife walked in and saw him crying and asked, "Why are you crying? What's wrong?" While the agent on the other end of the line was frantically asking if he was okay. Now, the truth is, Bruno also said that he was crying, and his wife was asking, why are you crying? And then the agent heard that he had to mute the phone, right? It was an emotional release of a lifetime of sacrifice. He was finally going to the Premier League, and he was doing it with a dream, with his dream childhood club. And they talked about, Portugal being so popular because of Cristiano Ronaldo and everything. Now, the very club that he had fallen in love with while watching Cristiano Ronaldo conquer Europe under Sir Alex Ferguson, right? So there's a whole lot deeper stuff, and this is kind of like the first part of the series, and then we're gonna break it down with the next one and all that. But this is Bruno Explodes Part 1. So don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and join us in the next video as we do the Part 2 of this video. God bless you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. See you on the next one.